Hello and welcome. You're watching News Central Television. I am Judith Atibi. Here are stories making headlines beyond the continent. And we begin in the United States of America, where Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s Senate confirmation hearing for Health Secretary turned heated today as Democrats confronted him over his controversial vaccine statements. Kennedy insisted he wouldn't restrict vaccine access if confirmed, but Democrats questioned his credibility, citing past claims that, quote, no vaccine is safe and effective, end quote. Ranking member Ron Wyden challenged Kennedy, reading quotes from podcasts where he expressed regret over vaccinating his children. Kennedy disputed the characterization, saying his comments were taken out of context. Wyden also pressed Kennedy about his role in a deadly missiles outbreak, in Samoa. As Health Secretary, Kennedy would oversee vaccine policy, food safety, and more, sparking concerns among medical professionals and lawmakers.
News reports have claimed that I'm anti-vaccine or anti-industry. I am neither. I am pro-safety.
We'll have order. Please proceed, Mr. Kennedy.
I am pro-safety. I worked for years to raise awareness about the mercury and toxic chemicals in fish, and nobody called me anti-fish. Trump's policies on Title X. I agree with President Trump that every abortion is a tragedy. I agree with him that we cannot be a moral nation if we have 1.2 million abortions a year. I agree with him that the states should control abortion. President Trump has told me that he wants to end late-term abortions, and he wants to protect conscious exemptions, and that he wants to end federal funding for abortions here or abroad. That's Title X. I serve at the pleasure of the president. I'm going to implement his policy.
For more on this, I'm joined by international correspondent Afia Hagen. Afia, very interesting times, and just looking at that hearing, just watching it, it was quite heated. Let's discuss some of the key lines, from Robert F. Kennedy's hearing. His stance on vaccines has been controversial in the past. What has been said about vaccines in the hearing?
Yes, Judith, that phrase, we live in interesting times, comes to mind. But yes, Robert F. Kennedy and vaccines, he has long been touted as someone who is anti-vaccine. He's written books about it in which he's stated that vaccines perhaps are wrong. He said that he has regretted vaccinating his children. But now when he was put under pressure from Democrats about his stances on vaccines, he said that he is not an anti-vaxxer, that he's not a vaccine skeptic, and that he's for vaccines, that he is for the health of people. And so it kind of seems that he maybe has tried to go back on those very, very strong statements that he's had before when it comes to vaccines, and denying now that he is a vaccine skeptic. He also, he's written about it in books. When he was asked about it, he said he couldn't remember writing that. So really sort of dialing down the rhetoric that we're usually used to hearing from him, which is someone who is quite strongly against the vaccines.
They seem to be dialing back, but there are also doubling down on the conversation of abortion, and it's a very hot button topic. I'm confused, Afia, and I'm going to go off script here and just say, why is this focus always on the women's uterus and not exactly on the people who spread their seeds? But I digress. What are his views so far? I know he was speaking there during that excerpt that we played about him still doubling down on President Trump's take on abortion. What does he have to say?
You've made a really good point there, Judith, isn't it? It's always a conversation about women's health and women's rights, even though it takes more than one person to make a baby. But when we come to RFK's view on abortion, now he was previously a Democrat who was very much for a woman's right to choose. And now he seems to be aligning with President Trump, who has said in the past that he thinks states should have the control on abortion. They should decide what is the legal limits for it. Now, again, Democrats, worried about his flip-flopping there, that he was very staunchly a Democrat who was very much for a woman's right to choose, and now seems to have gone to the other side, to the dark side, some of them have implied, on abortion. And of course, that was a very hot button topic during the US election. A lot of people very worried and very concerned about this right to choose for women, and seemingly that, it's lawmakers and mostly men that make the decisions about women's bodies. But when it came to abortion, RFK saying that he aligns with the president that states should be able to decide on the legal limits for abortion, so it could be completely different across the 50 United States of America.
And his role in a missiles outbreak in Samoa, what is that about?
Well, yes, this is a bit of a strange one. So there was a measles outbreak in Samoa in 2018. They suspended measles vaccines following 2 pediatric deaths, and that was linked to errors during vaccination. And basically, they recalled all the MMR, the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines. And that, even though the vaccines were restarted in April 2019, by October of that year, there was a measles outbreak because so many children hadn't been vaccinated. So in that time, RFK wrote to the Samoan Prime Minister questioning if the outbreak was in fact caused by inadequate vaccine coverage or alternatively by a defective vaccine. That's what he said in the letter. By the next month, the UN issued a warning that vaccine misinformation was in fact contributing to this measles outbreak in Samoa. By January of 2020, Samoa had more than 5,700 measles cases and there were 83 deaths. So basically, he had written in a book as well that said that parents have been misled to believe that measles is deadly and vaccines are safe, when he implied it was the other way round, and these vaccines have been linked to autism. So it's implied that he played a part in the misinformation that was going around about the measles vaccine at that time.
Whew, interesting times. Afia Hagen, our international correspondent, just a bit of insight there following the RFK's Junior's hearing as it's been poised to be Secretary for Health, which is going to be a very, very huge role there for him, and very important role as well. Afia, many thanks for doing this with us. Let's switch gears now, but still in the U.S., as the U.S. President Donald Trump continues to wield his power in the second week of his presidency. His most recent exercise of sweeping and contentious executive authority, this time by temporarily suspending government funding, triggered widespread uncertainty and anxiety with services including Meals on Wheels and housing support for the poor abruptly uncertain. Now, foreign was also greatly affected as well. For News Central, our international correspondent Afia Hagen has more. Take a look.
U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio widened exemptions in a sweeping freeze on foreign assistance, saying the United States would keep funding humanitarian items such as shelter and medicine. President Donald Trump, on returning to office last week, ordered a 90-day pause to review assistance by the United States, the world's largest donor in dollar terms. Rubio followed up by freezing virtually all funding, though he specified exemptions for emergency food as well as military assistance to Israel and Egypt. In a follow-up memo after an outcry from aid groups, Rubio clarified that other humanitarian assistance besides food would also be exempt during the review period. The aid freeze will also affect the U.S. domestically and sparked nationwide confusion and fear, with programs including Meals on Wheels and low-income housing assistance suddenly in limbo. Aid groups and Democratic lawmakers have voiced alarm over potentially far-reaching consequences of the funding freeze, both at home and abroad.
This is cruelty, this is lawlessness, This is a heist done on a national scale. No matter how much he may believe he does, the president does not have the authority to ignore the law, and we're going to fight this in every way that we can.
Trump's latest attempt to wield vast and questionable executive power, this time by temporarily halting federal aid, is raising huge concerns over how much power he has. But most profoundly, the drama set off a momentous legal battle over the scope of presidential authority, which will shape the new administration and the separation of powers, and is almost certain to land in the Supreme Court.
I'm going to the Oval Office and will be signed.
The issue further clarified that Trump intends to push presidential power to the limit, and there are growing suspicions that the administration is initiating political battles and legal fights specifically to get the conservative Supreme Court to further expand the scope of the presidency. For News Central, I'm Afia Hagan.
To South America, where Ecuador's President Daniel Noboa has announced plans to sell 250,000 barrels of oil per day to countries currently buying from Venezuela. This move aims to stop financing Venezuela's dictatorial regime under Nicolas Maduro. Noboa made this statement during a visit from Venezuelan opposition leader Edmundo González Urrutia, whom Ecuador recognizes as the rightful president. Ecuador produced 475,000 barrels of crude oil per day in 2024, with 72% being exported. The U.S. has also considered stopping oil purchases from Venezuela to pressure Maduro.
En el caso de que existan sanciones contra el régimen dictatorial de Nicolás Maduro, el Ecuador está dispuesto a vender hasta 250,000 barriles de petróleo diarios a las naciones que hoy en día compran el petróleo de Venezuela. De esa manera, se para el financiamiento de un régimen dictatorial. Hemos condenado al ilegítimo y dictatorial régimen de Nicolás Maduro por el irrespeto del Estado de Derecho.
En el caso de Venezuela, es lamentable un ejemplo doloroso de los riesgos que estas amenazas representan para la estabilidad de nuestra región. Pero es también una advertencia que nos convoca a actuar con firmeza y unidad.
You're watching news now. You're watching stories from beyond the continent. We're going to a short break. When we return, EU pledges 3 billion euros after the break. Welcome back. We now head to Europe, where European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has welcomed Jordan's King Abdullah II to Brussels, making a significant milestone in their relationship. The two leaders have signed a strategic and comprehensive partnership, solidifying their cooperation. The European Union has pledged an impressive 3 billion euros in finance and investment for Jordan, recognizing the country's vital role in maintaining stability in a conflict region. This partnership is expected to bolster Jordan's economy, improve education and vocational training, and support refugees and host communities. The EU's support package includes initiatives to promote private sector development, education and job opportunities for youth, as well as investments in water management and energy efficiency. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has issued a stern warning to the conservative opposition, stating that accepting support from the far-right AfD for immigration restrictions would be an unforgivable mistake. Scholz emphasized that Democrats in Germany have always avoided collaborating with the far right, citing the country's 75-year consensus. The debate comes as CDU leader Friedrich Merz considers tabling motions to toughen immigration policies following a recent knife attack. Merz has signaled willfulness to accept the party's backing, despite acknowledging the discomfort of cooperating with the far-right party. Now, Scholz criticized Merz's approach as populist and potentially breaching EU's laws, emphasizing that asylum rights are integral to Germany's values.
Seit Gründung der Bundesrepublik vor über 75 Jahren gab es immer einen klaren Konsens aller Demokratinnen und Demokraten. In unseren Parlamenten machen wir mit extremen Rechten nicht gemeinsame Sache. Sie haben diesen Grundkonsens unserer Republik im Affekt aufgekündigt. Und Sie haben Das Recht auf Asyl ist fester Bestandteil unserer Rechts- und Werteordnung. Daran dürfen wir nicht rütteln.
The French government is urging socialist lawmakers not to disrupt budget discussions with a crucial meeting set for Thursday. Government spokeswoman Sophie Pramas said negotiations are ongoing and expressed hope for a compromise. The socialists have conditioned their return to discussions on assurances from François Bayrou regarding immigration policies. The government has prioritized passing the budget, with Prime Minister Bayrou emphasizing its importance. Meanwhile, the socialists are demanding that Bayrou retract his statements, his comments on submersion and aid, and maintain state medical aid for undocumented immigrants.
À ce stade, les négociations sont en cours. Les membres de la commission mixte paritaire sont en train de discuter et nous souhaitons qu'il n'y ait aucune prise d'otage de quelque nature que ce soit sur le budget et l'adoption du budget pour la France. C'est le sujet numéro 1 pour notre pays. Nous devons véritablement aboutir à une CMP positive et les négociations sont...
Meanwhile, the Vilaine River has overflowed into Rendon as heavy rainfall sweeps across northwest France, flooding streets and merging them with the river. The ongoing deluge threatens to surpass records set during the 1995 flood. The situation in Redon is becoming increasingly hazardous, with water levels rising and local infrastructure submerged. Authorities are bracing for more severe flooding, particularly in areas not typically prone to such high water levels. Evacuations have already begun in parts of Redon, which is just western France. The Swedish police have raised the alarm over an escalation of violence as bombings continue to surge across the country. Now, this follows the arrest of 2 individuals in connection with a series of explosions on Tuesday in Stockholm and Helsingborg. With over 30 incidents recorded since the beginning of the year, authorities have noted a shift in the nature of these attacks. The explosions now appear to be economically motivated, primarily targeting businesses for extortion, marking a departure from the previously dominant pattern of gang-related violence. Police are intensifying efforts to identify the perpetrators, who often exploit young individuals for criminal activities, taking advantage of Sweden's laws regarding juvenile responsibility.
Det är en våldseskalering, men det är också en förändring av problemet. Majoriteten av de sprängningar vi har drabbats av i december och januari, de har snarare ekonomiska incitament, är strategiska gärningar riktade mot företag, ofta i utpressningssyfte. Det här är ett annat typ av problem än det konfliktrelaterade våldet. Det här våldet är ofta sammankopplat då med utpressningar, hot, och man kräver pengar för att våldet och hotet ska upphöra.
And just a bit of news reaching us now that the Laken-Riley Act is a proposed President Trump have now signed the Laken-Riley Act bill. Now it's an act that is a proposed United States law that requires the Department of Homeland Security to detain non-citizens charged with or convicted of theft-related crimes, assaulting a police officer, or a crime that results in death or serious bodily injury like drunk driving.